You ever have one of those nights where the air just feels different? Like something's about to happen, and your body knows it before your mind catches up? That was this night. The sky outside was heavy, gray, and swollen, like it had been holding back tears all day. You could hear the rain tapping against the windows, soft and steady, like a secret it was trying to whisper. The whole house felt hushed, dim. Even the walls seemed to be holding their breath. And I was too. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll my phone, pretending everything was normal, but I wasn't really seeing anything. I was listening. For him. And then I heard it. The sound of his footsteps down the hallway, slow, measured, almost hesitant. Like he wasn't sure if he should be coming closer, or if he hoped I'd be the one to cross the line first. It wasn't the kind of sound that should have made my heart race, but it did. Every thud of his shoes on the hardwood floor felt louder than it should. And with each step, my breath caught just a little more. He was coming. And the worst part? Or maybe the most dangerous part. I wanted him to. Not because I planned it. Not because I thought it was right. But because something inside me needed to know. If he felt it too. If I wasn't just imagining all those glances that lasted too long. The way his eyes softened when he looked at me. The way he always touched my shoulder, just barely, like his hand wanted to say something his mouth never could. We weren't supposed to feel this. Not in this house. Not with him being who he was. But you can't always help where your desire goes, can you? Sometimes, it finds you in the quiet. In the spaces no one else is looking. And that night, desire found me. I remember looking up just as he turned the corner into the kitchen. Our eyes met. And something shifted, so small, so quick, you'd miss it if you weren't already drowning in the weight of it. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but didn't. I could feel the electricity, low and humming, pulling us both into some invisible current we didn't dare name yet. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just let myself feel it. And in that breath, that single, loaded second, I stopped pretending I didn't want him to. If you're new here, this is Sheila Hart Tales. We tell the kinds of stories you can't stop thinking about, sensual, forbidden, and always emotionally real. If you've ever felt something you couldn't say out loud, you're in the right place. Make sure you subscribe and stay with me because this story? Yeah, you're gonna have thoughts. And I'm ready to share everything. Let's begin. After that night, after that look, everything started to feel different. He didn't say anything, neither did I. But something had shifted. We were still careful, still playing our roles. But underneath the small talk and the day-to-day motions, there was this current running between us. Soft, hot, dangerous. It started with little things. Tiny moments that most people wouldn't even notice. Like the way he handed me a plate at dinner one evening. He didn't just give it to me, his fingers brushed against mine. Light. Intentional. Too long to be casual. Too short to be a confession. But it lingered. My skin buzzed where he touched me. Like his fingertips left an invisible heat, one that I could still feel hours later when I was lying in bed, alone, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But it did. I knew it did. Because I started noticing everything after that. The way he walked into a room, shoulders relaxed, but eyes always scanning for me first. The way his voice dipped lower when we were alone. That subtle rasp that curled around my stomach and made my breath catch. He never said anything out loud, but his body spoke in a language I suddenly understood. And then there was a scent. God, it was subtle like cedar and clean soap, but there was something deeper in it. Warm. Masculine. The kind of scent that makes you turn your head without thinking, just to get one more breath of it. It clung to the space around him. To his clothes. His skin. I found myself standing closer to him than I needed to, leaning in just a little more when we passed each other in the hallway, holding my breath when he walked behind me, wondering if he noticed the way I tensed every time he got near. And I think he did. Because he started testing that space too. One afternoon, I was reaching for something in the kitchen cabinet, up high, out of reach, and before I could stretch, he was behind me. Close. Too close. His hand came over mine, resting gently against the small of my back to steady me. His other arm stretched past my shoulder as he grabbed the glass I'd been trying to reach. And for a moment, we were pressed together, barely an inch of air between us. I could feel the heat of his chest against my back, the rise and fall of his breathing. His breath brushed the side of my neck, warm and slow. Neither of us moved. Not right away. We just stayed there, suspended in this charged silence where time didn't exist, where it felt like one wrong move would shatter everything or finally make it real. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I was afraid that if I did, if I looked him in the eye, I wouldn't be able to stop whatever was already burning between us. He handed me the glass, finally. But he didn't step back right away. His fingers grazed mine. Again. Slower this time. And when I finally turned, just enough to see him, his eyes were already on me. Not in that distracted, casual way most men look at you, but deeply. Like he was trying to memorize something. Something he wasn't supposed to want. I should have looked away. I wanted to. But instead, I just stared back. Quiet. Open. Letting the moment stretch, letting the question between us go unanswered, at least for now. Because it wasn't about touching, not yet. It was about knowing. Knowing that he saw me, not just as his stepdaughter or his wife's child, but as a woman. A woman who, for the first time in a long time, was aching to be felt. I wish I could say things cooled off after that moment in the kitchen. That we went back to normal. That I could shake it off and forget how close he'd stood behind me, how it felt when our fingers touched like that. But I couldn't, because something in me had cracked open. A door I didn't even know was locked had swung wide. And now? I couldn't stop hearing the quiet in this house. I couldn't stop feeling the way his eyes followed me. The way his presence filled a room like a slow, heavy fog that made it hard to breathe, harder still to walk away. It was late when it finally happened, the conversation. The kind of late where the world feels softer, like everything is coated in velvet and silence. The kind of late where words come easier, maybe because there's no one else around to hear them. Everyone else had gone to bed. The house was dark except for the soft glow from the kitchen light. I was sitting on the couch, curled into the corner, knees drawn up, a throw blanket pulled around me. Just holding a glass of water I wasn't really drinking. He walked in quietly, like he didn't want to startle me. But he didn't leave either. Instead, he sat down in the armchair across from me. Not too close, but not far enough to ignore. For a while, we didn't speak. Just shared the stillness between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was waiting. Like we both knew something was coming, and neither of us wanted to rush it. Then he broke the silence. "You're quiet lately," he said softly. I looked at him. Not startled. Just open. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I've been in my head a lot." He nodded slowly. "Wanna tell me what's in there?" I stared at the glass in my hand, watching the condensation slide down the sides. My voice was barely above a whisper when I said, "I've just been feeling out of place. Like I live here, but I don't really exist here, you know." He didn't interrupt. Just let me keep going. I walk through these rooms, sit at the table, laugh when I'm supposed to. But half the time it's like I'm invisible. Like I could disappear and no one would notice until the dishes piled up. That surprised him, I think. I saw something shift in his expression. Something sad. "I notice," he said. "I always notice." That caught me off guard. More than I wanted it to. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. His voice dropped even lower, like the truth was heavier than he expected. "I know that feeling. The invisible one." I looked up at him again. Our eyes met across the dim space. He swallowed hard. "You think marriage is going to feel like a warm place to land. Like coming home after a storm. But sometimes, it just feels like you're stuck in a room with someone who stopped looking at you a long time ago." My throat tightened. Not because of what he said, but because I knew exactly what he meant. I thought it was just me, I admitted. He shook his head slowly. It's not. Silence settled between us again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Electric. And then, like we were both afraid to cross a line too directly, we shifted into hypotheticals. He ran his hand along the armrest and asked, "You ever think about what it would feel like to be really seen by someone? Like, so deeply, they could look straight through your skin and find the part of you even you forgot was there." I held his gaze and nodded. Yeah, I think about that a lot. And if you found that with someone you weren't supposed to, what would you do? He didn't look away. I didn't either. I think I'd want to know if it was real, I whispered. Or just loneliness dressing itself up as something else. His lips pressed into a line. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding something in for years. And if it was real, he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just let the question hang between us, thick as the air, trembling with what we didn't dare say out loud. And then, finally, I said the only thing that felt true. I think I'd stopped running from it. That was the moment. That right there. Not a kiss. Not a touch. Just the truth. Spoken softly, in a quiet room, with no one else around but the two people who couldn't keep pretending anymore. The quiet after that confession sat thick in the room, like fog pressed against glass, soft but impossible to see through. We didn't speak. Not for a long moment. But he didn't look away. Neither did I. There was something terrifying in that kind of silence. Not because it was empty, but because it was honest. Because we were both in it, stripped of the lies we told ourselves to get through the day. And then his voice broke through, barely more than a breath. Have you ever wanted something you weren't supposed to want? It was the kind of question you don't ask unless you already know the answer. But he asked anyway, and I didn't pretend. I nodded. Slowly, deliberately. My heart thudded in my chest, louder than the ticking of the clock behind us. I could hear it in my ears, feel it in my fingertips. I knew what was coming, but hearing him say it out loud, that was different. He leaned back slightly, his gaze still on me, never wavering. His fingers traced the edge of his knee, like he needed something to do with his hands or he might use them for something else. Sometimes I imagine, he said, his voice low, careful, what it would be like if things were different between us. My breath caught. He didn't move. Just let the words hang there, fragile but powerful. If we weren't step anything, I whispered, my voice trembling. If we didn't have to pretend this wasn't real. He nodded. Slowly, like every part of him had just exhaled something he'd been choking on. Or if we stopped pretending we cared, he added. Pretending that all the roles we're supposed to play mean more than what we actually feel. That was it. That was the moment the truth uncurled between us like smoke from a candle, dark, slow, impossible to ignore. The truth was we weren't blood. We weren't even family by history. My mother had married him just over a year ago. A fast decision, a whirlwind romance, the kind that left everyone else spinning in its wake. I had been living on my own before that. College. Part-time jobs. My own little apartment in the city. I'd only moved back into the house because Mom said it would feel more like a home again. And at first, it did. He was kind, respectful, polite, almost distant in the beginning. But slowly, so slowly it almost didn't register at first, the pull started. It wasn't a thunderclap. It wasn't forbidden glances or secret touches. It was late-night kitchen talks and the way he remembered how I took my coffee. It was the quiet comfort of knowing someone saw me. Not the version of me I showed the world, but the one who moved through life, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. The one who'd been hurt before. Left. Forgotten. He saw her. And I saw him too. The man beneath the husband. Beneath the carefully measured smiles. The one who looked tired at the edges of his eyes. Who never reached for her hand anymore. Who spoke softer to me than he ever did to her. And now we were sitting across from each other, finally saying the things we'd buried under layers of shouldn't and can't. I never meant for it to be like this, I said quietly. I didn't come back here looking for this. I know, he replied. I didn't expect you to be. You. That made my chest tighten. You're not a kid, he went on. You're not fragile. You see things. You feel things. And I'm trying to be good. To play the part. But it's hard to breathe in a house where everything feels staged. I swallowed hard. My fingers tightened around the glass in my lap. So, what does that mean? I asked. What are we even saying right now? He looked at me then. Not with lust. Not even with guilt. But with ache. Raw, quiet ache. It means we stop pretending, he said. Maybe not out there. Not to her. Not yet. But here, with each other. We stop lying. And, just like that, everything changed. We weren't playing anymore. We weren't hiding behind titles or roles or rules we didn't write. We were just two people, lonely in the same house, wanting something we weren't supposed to want, but already too deep to deny it any longer. That night, after the conversation, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, but my skin still burned. Like his voice had left fingerprints on my body. My mind ran in circles, chasing every word, every look, every breath between us. I kept asking myself, what have I done? What are we doing? And then, the voice I hate the most, the one that creeps in when it's dark and quiet, whispered, what if it's already too late? I kept replaying it. The way he looked at me, not like a stepdaughter, not even like a friend. Like someone he was fighting not to need. And I wasn't innocent in it either. I met him there. Matched his stare. Matched his ache. I told myself to stop. To shut the door I let swing open. But every time I tried to close it, something inside me ached. Like I was locking away the only thing that had felt real in. I don't even know how long. And that's what scared me the most. Not the secret. Not the shame. But how alive it made me feel. The next morning, I couldn't look at her, my mom. She was standing in the kitchen, humming to herself while buttering toast like everything was perfect. Like the house wasn't full of silence and glances that didn't belong. I watched her from the doorway, something sour blooming in my stomach. She looked right at me and smiled. You barely ate last night. I forced a smile back. Wasn't really hungry. She nodded, brushing it off like she always did. That's what it had always been like with her. Surface-level affection. Polished parenting. But never real connection. Never the kind of closeness that made you feel held. When I was younger, I used to journal about it. Page after page filled with things I wished she'd say. Questions I wanted her to ask. Feelings I needed her to notice. But she never did. She was always more concerned with the way things looked than the way they felt. And maybe that's why this thing with him hit me so hard. Because he noticed. He felt. And that attention. That warmth. It was a kind of gravity I hadn't been strong enough to resist. I started writing again. Just 3 nights after that talk. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, back against the wall, journal open on my knees. I couldn't write the truth, not fully, but I wrote what I could. I don't know who I am around him anymore. I want to hate myself for feeling this way. But part of me feels like I've finally been seen. And that part is loud. Louder than guilt. Louder than shame. I don't want to ruin anything, but I also don't want to keep disappearing. My pen stopped moving, but my hand kept shaking. Because that was it right there. Disappearing. That's what I'd been doing for years. In friendships. In relationships. Even in this house. But he looked at me like I wasn't just there, I was real. Present. Needed. And even though I told myself it was wrong, my body didn't listen. Later that week, he reached over me to grab a mug from the cabinet. I should have stepped aside. I meant to. But when his chest brushed against my back, my breath hitched. Every nerve in me lit up like a live wire. And I hated how much I liked it. I hated how even now, with my head screaming no, my body leaned back just slightly, betraying me. And when his hand grazed my wrist, Just barely, my knees almost buckled. I pulled away, pretended I didn't feel it. But I did. Every second. Every flicker of electricity. And then came the worst part. The quiet in my room afterward. The guilt soaking through my skin like sweat. The shame twisting through my chest like thorns. I sat in front of the mirror that night and asked myself questions I couldn't answer. What if this breaks everything? What if I ruin her life just because I want to feel something real for once? But then came the harder question. What if I don't, and spend the rest of my life wondering what it could have felt like to be chosen? To be wanted, not for how I fit into someone's life, but for who I was when the masks came off. That question kept me awake the longest, because I already knew the answer. I stopped waiting for signs. Stopped hoping the weight of my feelings would disappear if I ignored them long enough. He wasn't chasing me anymore. Now, I was walking toward him. Not recklessly, not to provoke, but because I needed to know, needed to feel it, not just in looks and stolen touches, but in the truth of it. This wasn't just his fantasy anymore. Now it was mine too. That night, I took my time getting dressed. Nothing bold, nothing obvious. Just intentional. A soft, slinky camisole I hadn't worn in months. It skimmed my skin like a whisper, catching light in just the right places. I didn't need it to scream anything. I just wanted to feel awake inside my body, like I was choosing it. Choosing me. Downstairs, I heard the soft hum of the dishwasher. He was still in the kitchen. Alone. My mother had gone to bed early, claiming a headache. I took a deep breath, smoothed the edge of the fabric against my thigh, and walked down barefoot, quiet, but not hesitant. He was rinsing something in the sink when I stepped in. Didn't hear me at first. But when he did, he turned. His eyes swept over me, slow, restrained, but unmistakably changed. He swallowed hard, like the air between us had thickened suddenly. He started, gesturing to the sink. I stepped closer. Not too close, but enough that the tension between us wasn't theoretical anymore. Need help drying? I asked, reaching for a towel. Our fingers brushed as I took the glass from him. I didn't pull away this time. I let it sit. Let the silence say more than my words ever could. His breath hitched, just barely, but I caught it. I dried one glass. Then another. Still not rushing. Still not breaking eye contact longer than necessary. And when I turned to place them on the rack, I felt him watching me. Not with hunger. With something deeper. Curiosity. Conflict. Want held back by a dam that was starting to crack. After we finished, I leaned against the counter. The air was still. I've been thinking about that night, I said softly. His eyes didn't leave mine. Me too. I need to know something, I continued. Not because I'm confused, but because I don't want to pretend anymore. He didn't speak. He just nodded, slowly, like he was bracing for something bigger than words. I feel it when I'm around you, I whispered. Even when I try not to. And I think, maybe you do too. He stepped forward then. One small step. Nothing bold. Nothing that crossed any line. But enough. Enough to answer the question I hadn't really asked. I didn't move back. My heart was pounding, but I was still. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was ownership. And in that silence, standing there with my skin buzzing, my voice steady, I knew. I wasn't afraid of the line anymore. Because I wasn't waiting for it to be crossed. I was choosing if and how we moved beyond it. I didn't mean to say it. At least, not out loud. But it slipped out, soft and sure, before I could stop it. Be home tonight by 10. Just you. I'll leave the door cracked. And when I looked up, his eyes didn't widen. He didn't flinch. He just nodded once. Slow. Like he'd been waiting for permission he didn't know he needed. I walked away before I could take it back. Because I shouldn't have said it, but I meant it. All day, my thoughts wouldn't settle. I went through the motions, coffee, emails, dishes, but everything felt like noise. Like background static to something louder pulsing under the surface. I couldn't focus. couldn't breathe the same. Because the moment had already started. It wasn't about if anymore. It was about when. And that knowing, that edge, it lit me up in places I'd forgotten I had. As the sun dipped low, I started to prepare. Not for him. For me. I lit a candle. Not the sweet, sugary ones, but the kind that smelled like warmth. Amber. Smoke. A little like him. I cracked the window just enough to let the breeze slip through, cool and soft, teasing the edges of the curtain. I chose music, not anything dramatic, just something slow and low, the kind you don't notice until your body starts moving with it. Then I pulled out the throw blanket that always made me feel safe and spread it across the couch. It wasn't about seduction. It was about intention. Creating a space that felt like how my heart sounded, measured, but trembling. I changed into something I didn't need a mirror to validate. Simple. Soft. Barely their sleeves. The fabric clung just enough to remind me I had skin worth noticing. I tied my hair up, then took it down again. My reflection didn't look different, but I felt different. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was choosing. As the hours crawled by, I found myself pacing, checking the clock, then the window. I kept replaying it. His voice. The way it lowered when he said my name. The way his hand had lingered on mine, almost like he was testing how much longer he could stay there without crossing the line. The way he looked at me like something in him was unraveling, and he didn't want it to stop. Those little moments weren't little anymore. They were chapters. Clues. Proof that this thing between us had always been brewing, quietly, relentlessly, beneath all the rules and roles. By 9:50, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From knowing. From the weight of what might happen if he walked through that door, and what it would mean if he didn't. Every second stretched long. I sat on the couch, then stood, then sat again. The music looped. The candle flickered. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to get out, trying to meet him before my lips could. And then, just before 10, I heard it. A car pulling into the driveway. Engine off. Silence. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. And then, the sound that cracked something open inside me. The front door creaking. Just a little. I'd left it unlocked, just like I said. And I knew he was standing on the other side, hand on the knob, heart probably echoing mine. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because this moment, this wasn't about rushing forward. It was about standing still and letting the anticipation carry me. And God, it did. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure if this was real. Or if he'd finally gone too far. His hand still on the knob. His eyes scanning the room like it had changed, like I had changed. But I saw it. In his chest, how it rose and fell. Fast but steady. In his jaw, tight but not clenched. In his eyes, dark, searching, and so full of everything neither of us had dared say out loud. He wasn't leaving. Not this time. He stepped inside without a word. Closed the door gently behind him, like the silence mattered more than an excuse. We just looked at each other for a second. Then two. Then what felt like a whole lifetime lived in the space between two blinks. I didn't ask him to sit. He didn't wait to be invited. He moved to the couch. Sat at the far end first, like he was giving me a choice. But I didn't need space. I needed closeness. I sat beside him. Not too close. But close enough that our knees brushed when I shifted slightly. Close enough that if I exhaled just a little deeper, I'd feel his warmth on my shoulder. Neither of us moved for a while. We didn't need to. The room felt thick with everything we'd been swallowing for months. He looked over at me. Really looked. Like he was reading a language he knew but hadn't spoken in years. Then, slowly, he lifted one hand. It hovered for a moment, uncertain, reverent, before brushing a loose strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers didn't rush. They lingered just long enough to send shivers through every place he didn't touch. I closed my eyes. Not to be dramatic. just because it felt safe. Like, for once, I didn't have to explain why something so simple made my whole body feel like it was singing. When I opened them again, he was still watching me. Not hungrily, not like a man tearing through restraint, but like someone caught in awe. Like the space between us mattered more than the destination. His breath mingled with mine, soft, steady, warm. Our shoulders nearly touched now. I could smell him, soap, something musky, faintly woodsy. And underneath that, heat. Not sweat, not exertion. Just the quiet warmth of someone fully present. I turned toward him, just a fraction. And in that small motion, our knees pressed fully together. His eyes dropped to my lips for a second. A single second. Then back up. Still no kiss. Still holding. Still waiting. My fingers brushed against his hand. Intentional. Barely there. And he didn't flinch. Didn't ask permission. He just laced his fingers through mine slowly, like he was giving me time to stop it if I needed to. I didn't. We sat like that, hands entwined, knees pressed, eyes locked. And then, finally, he leaned in. Not like in the movies. No swelling music. No sweeping drama. Just a slow, trembling pull of gravity between two people who were done pretending. His forehead met mine first. Then his nose brushed against mine. We both stopped. Hesitated. Our lips hovered, uncertain. A breath passed. Another. And then, a kiss. Soft. Searching. Not desperate, but needy in a different way, like two people touching something they never thought they'd get to feel. We pulled back. Just a breath apart. Eyes wide. Hearts louder than any words could be. Then again. A kiss that deepened, just slightly. One that asked, "Is this okay?" And answered, "Yes." He cupped the side of my face, thumb brushing lightly beneath my eye. I pressed my hand to his chest, right over his heart. It was racing. Just like mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The moment was unfolding. Not fast. Not all at once. But with care. With reverence. With that trembling silence that happens when you know you're on the edge of something that changes everything. Every breath felt like a confession. Every quiet exhale from him, from me, it all said what words never dared to. I'd imagined this moment, wondered how it would feel. But nothing could have prepared me for the way my skin felt too tight for my body, how the air seemed to pulse between us like a second heartbeat. He didn't rush. And I didn't either. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't greedy. It was something else entirely, like we were memorizing each other, afraid we'd forget. He pulled me closer, slowly. His hand on my back, fingers resting just above the curve of my waist. Not claiming. Not pressing. Just grounding me. His forehead rested against mine again, and in that stillness, I felt it, the hesitation giving way to surrender. Our lips found each other again, and this time the kiss was fuller. Deeper. Like we'd both stopped asking permission and started answering a need. I felt his hand move, up, then down, then still. Not exploring. Just feeling. Just being there. And it made me tremble. Not from fear. From the truth of it. The intimacy of it. Because this wasn't about lust. It was about longing. The kind that sits beneath your ribs for months, maybe years, until one moment, one touch, breaks it open. My fingers slid over his chest, feeling the tension in him. The way his body held back even when his heart didn't want to. "I'm here," I whispered. And I meant it. For tonight, for this. For the version of me who had always wanted to be seen like this. Understood. Chosen. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something cracked in his eyes. Something soft. Something like grief and awe wrapped into one. His voice was low, raw. "I never meant for this to happen." I nodded, eyes stinging. "But you needed it." And so did I. There was no music. No candlelight. Just two people in a room that had once felt too small, now stretching wide enough to hold 1,000 unspoken things. He leaned into me, his hands cradling my face, Not with possession, but reverence. I could feel it in the way he kissed me again, slower this time. Like he was tasting truth. Our breaths were uneven now, our bodies shifting in sync with something wordless. When he touched my shoulder, it wasn't about seduction, it was about comfort, about checking if I was still with him. And I was. I traced the line of his jaw, my hand trembling. I was surprised at myself. Surprised that I wanted this so much, that I wasn't afraid in the way I thought I would be. Instead, I felt powerful, awake. Like all the parts of me I'd buried beneath duty and silence were finally rising up. He kissed my wrist, then the inside of my palm. Soft, slow. Every inch of contact felt like being told I mattered. Not for how I looked, not for what I could give, but because in this moment, in his arms, I was enough. We moved together, slowly, bodies shifting, adjusting. Not like strangers trying to impress each other, but like two people finding rhythm. Finding language in breath, in fingers lacing together, in the quiet gasps that rose when we got too close and didn't pull away. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. There were pauses, nervous glances, hands that hovered before landing. But none of that mattered. Because every second was drenched in meaning, in choice, in the freedom of not pretending anymore. He whispered my name like it was a secret he'd been dying to say out loud. And I held him like I'd been waiting for this moment long before I ever admitted it. We weren't reckless. We were intentional. We weren't breaking something. We were waking up. And when it was done, when we finally stilled, his hand stayed on my back, warm and steady. No rush. No retreat. Just the quiet weight of two people who had crossed a line and found something real on the other side. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. "For what?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, eyes glassy, lips parted, and said, "For letting me feel again." We didn't speak for a long time after. Just stayed there, wrapped in the quiet hum of the night, his breath slow and steady against my shoulder. His arm was still around me, fingers tracing tiny, absent shapes along my back like he wasn't ready to let go, and neither was I. The room felt softer now. The tension had melted, but in its place was something heavier, something real. Not regret. Not exactly. But awareness. We had changed something. Crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong. Just irreversible. I watched the shadows move across the ceiling, listened to the low tick of the clock on the nightstand. Time was still passing, but I wasn't ready for what came next. I didn't want to think about my mother, or the way the world might look at us. I just wanted to exist, right there. In that impossible moment where everything made sense, even the parts that shouldn't have. He shifted, just slightly, and I felt the weight of his gaze on me. Not possessive. Not apologetic. Just present. Real. "Are you okay?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded. Then after a second, I whispered back, "Are you?" He gave this soft, almost broken laugh. Not out of humor. More like disbelief. "I don't know," he said. "But I've never felt more awake." We laid there, side by side, not touching anymore, but still connected in that invisible way people are after something deep has passed between them. He didn't try to say the right thing. He didn't make promises. Neither did I. But he turned to me again, tucked a piece of hair behind my ear with that same aching gentleness he'd carried all night, and said, "Thank you." And I looked at him, eyes open, chest wide, no armor, and asked, "For what?" He hesitated, then smiled, just a little. For seeing me. For not looking away. It hit me then, how rare that was. To be seen without conditions. To be held without roles or titles or expectations. Just seen. Not as someone's daughter. Not as someone to manage or mold or correct. But as a woman. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a secret. I didn't feel like a sin. I felt alive. And wanted. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own skin. Have you ever wanted something so badly, but you were too afraid to name it out loud? Like, if you even thought it too clearly, it might shatter the version of you everyone else believed in. So you bury it. You swallow the ache. You smile when you're supposed to, nod when it's expected, keep quiet when your heart is screaming. But it doesn't go away, does it? Desire like that, it doesn't just vanish. It waits. It hums under your skin. It visits you in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, when you're lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, wondering what your life could feel like if you stopped apologizing for wanting more. I used to think I was wrong for craving what I did. Used to think that wanting something forbidden made me selfish or broken. But now, I think the real danger is never asking yourself what you truly need, never letting yourself feel it fully. We're all carrying stories we're not supposed to tell, all walking around with invisible chapters stitched into our skin. And some of us are just waiting for someone to ask, what if you didn't have to keep pretending? So I'll ask you now. What's the thing you've never dared to say out loud? You don't have to give the whole story. Just a feeling, a sentence, a memory that still lives in the back of your throat. Drop it in the comments if you're ready. You're safe here. You're not alone. This is Sheila Hart Tales. We tell the stories that burn slow and stay with you long after they're done. If this one moved you, made you feel seen, or stirred something inside you that you didn't expect, subscribe, like, share, because there are more stories coming, more moments like this. And if your heart is still beating a little faster, that means you were meant to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.